Good evening, everyone. This is JustVine with 2MK, and today we are going to be continuing our bot tune-up stream. So we'll be going over quite a few bots today. We are checking to see if there are any changes in the characters from the balance patch that need to be changed. As well as the V triggers and so on. So, to start us off, we have KarinBot. The purpose of this bot is mainly a focus on pressure and footsies. Karin has received some of the more significant changes to her moves from the balance update. So we'll be going over a review of the bot herself first before going into our V-Trigger 2 section. So what is the point system for KarinBot? We have Block and Punish Light Rasenha, Block and Punish EX Orochi, Block and Punish Tintko, and punish Karin's 2 medium kick without getting a counter hit on Karin. Basically to assure that you got a counter hit and did not just get a hit off of the bot pressing buttons, essentially. So this is one of the more difficult bots to put in. However, this particular version of the bot was entered in by Kansuki Dynasty herself. So it's about as good and clean a bot as you can get for our testing purposes. Overall, this bot feels pretty similar so far. Just as evasive as ever, as you can see. The startup on her heavy kick is a little slower now. It's 2 frames, I believe, making it a 12-frame startup. But honestly, at the ranges Karin uses that move, you can still get some pretty good use out of it. Now, part of this bot and getting the most out of what she has to teach you is basically learning at what range to stand at against Karin, while still being close enough to be able to punish her crouching medium kick. This is sort of difficult, especially for newer players, as a lot of Karin's good tools, in terms of footsie buttons, still have a decent time working in that range. So, for newer players, she can be quite intimidating and put you under a lot of pressure. This is mainly why she was created the way she was. Because that sort of feeling and being able to whiff punish Karin under those sorts of conditions is very important, especially as you get more and more used to the game and are more capable of executing your own stuff. Now, you don't want to push buttons against EX. Words escape me. Thank you, Mujin Kaku. As it's fairly safe. And the normal version of Orochi is also decently safe. However, her EX is a lot more extended. That's part of the reason why we have that as the point system as it is now. But KarinBot also has a good tendency to make you think about a lot of things at once. So if you've gone through this bot before, and you've gone through a few of our other bots, she's always a very good bot to come back to and get a good grasp on keeping yourself having all of your pieces together at once while still facing quite a bit of pressure if you don't have a partner to train with for that sort of thing. So overall, I don't see anything too different in terms of the way the bot is functioning, so I'm going to turn on her second V trigger and we will see how that goes. And there you go. Thank you, KarinBot, for immediately showing the purpose of that V-trigger. So what that does is basically this bot is both footsies and pressure related. Her first V-trigger allows Karin to do quite a bit of interesting offensive pressure, and not all of it is easy to keep track of. But her second V-trigger is almost sort of a parry, and it can make you question what footsie buttons you want to actually be pressing in case you get, well, parried and put into a possibly bad situation depending what move it was and how far away you are from her. I know my own style involves hitting buttons in neutral, such as my lovely stand medium kick or my stand heavy punch at long ranges to sort of keep the opponent from moving in on me, to freeze them, and possibly go into strange pressure that they may not be ready for. That V-trigger situation that she currently has is interesting if you are putting a lot of pressure on her, but I'm not sure how well that works out as far as training you to understand and respect her footsie range a little better. So that will be something I'll be specifically looking at as I play her a little bit more. It looks like it'd be a good way to punish a player if they were bullying her or particularly trying to go in hard on her. But most of the point system isn't really that. Most of the point system involves punishes after block or whiff situations. So my main question would be, is there a point at her crouching medium kick currently, as we have her programmed right now, where she can hit that V-trigger occasionally just to make the player watch, or perhaps have it a little bit after, so if you miss time the whiff punish, if you go a bit too late or a bit too early, can she use her V-trigger then? If it were to be used at all, since we aren't actually going to be having all of the bots with V-trigger variants, since for the most part some of them are redundant, some of them don't actually teach the concept the bot is designed for that well, all that sort of stuff. But we're still looking into stuff, which is what part of this stream is all about. But I do think there would be some use to her V trigger to. Brilliant would have to give me any testing she can think of. At the moment, I can't really think of anything, but I'm not really a Karin player. Other than maybe what I just mentioned. About having the ability to use the V trigger somewhere near that crouching medium kick. But as it stands, I feel like she loses a bit of offensive pressure. I see. And honestly, that's probably one of the things that I would appreciate, having a more visceral way to teach the player not to do that. Or wait, am I thinking the same thing? No, I probably gave me something messed up. Anyway. Yeah, I confused Eugene with Pinko. Anyway. The cancel window for the new V trigger for Bison after. Scissor kick is a little tight. Alright. Well, unless you can think of any tests, I think KarinBot registers as clear on both counts. So once I lose my life here, we'll switch over to our next bot, which is Ibuki. Alrighty. So IbukiBot is yet another one of our advanced bots. The actions that she has are fairly simple to put in. However, she is meant to teach you some fairly advanced things about your character if you do not know them yet. She is mostly intended to teach you mix-up defense and spacing for punishes, and the punishes available to the character you are using, making her useful for learning new characters if you are picking up a secondary or something like that, or just trying out a new character. Now, Ibuki did receive a few changes. She received some changes to the pushback on her target combos and the recovery of some of her moves. So, for now, let's take a look at her most basic form. Now, she is one of the more flexible bots compared to some of the other ones. Those bombs. So, she can be more character specific and tweaked than some of the other bots. The one we have right now on screen is mostly the vanilla-ish one, since my characters don't really need that many changes. So the few moves that she did receive changes to that are important to the goal system involved with Ibuki, which is punishing a specific target combo of hers, the command dash, punishing her for recharging her kunai. That sort of stuff is basically untouched, and the bot doesn't use the other target combos that extensively. So overall, I don't expect her to have changed too much, and honestly she feels pretty similar. Her bombs did take a little bit of a different change as well, but I really have not seen anything too different. She is still quite able to mix you up with her bombs. And all that good stuff. And as you can see, her V-Trigger 1 definitely makes her capable of keeping you off her too heavily, making you have to really think about how you want to punish her and when. And honestly, how to keep her out, because if she gets in on you too hard, she can take out quite a bit of your life.
Perfect KO.
So let's turn on that second V-Trigger of hers, since I don't see anything in particular worth noting there. Now, as you can see, her second V-Trigger definitely is still fairly mix-up oriented, so that specific part of it shouldn't change the bot too much. And honestly, getting used to all of the different timings of the shuriken, as you can see, if I try to overextend like I've been doing, sort of on purpose, also just slightly autopiloting from talking while playing, but the same sort of situation happens, right? The bomb explosion covers a wider area all at once, but, well, not even wider, I don't think. But the shuriken still can definitely get in your way if you try to jump in at her, or keep an attack going when it's been thrown out. And honestly, throw, just like the bomb, seems to go and get rid of that particular worry of the mix-up. So you still learn that particular lesson. It definitely feels a little different, but really not that much. The timing is a little bit different. And if you are an Ibuki player, there are quite a few mix-ups related to the kunai already labbed out for you. And honestly, they're fairly cool looking, so I would check them out in the Twitterverse. Even if you're not an Ibuki player and you just like really cool mix-ups in Street Fighter. And there goes a chunk of life. And there goes more. Gotta watch your toes against IbukiBot. Now, there are some ways that we could probably change the bot to do more damage, but honestly, given the way bots work, giving them more damage isn't necessarily that great for teaching. Since, really, you already are getting hurt to begin with. I'm gonna focus more on the target combo just to double check if the ranges really are similar enough for punishing. And seeing how that interacts with the timings of the shuriken. Now, to get the points for punishing the target combo, obviously you have to get hit, or at least be fairly close to her. Which puts you in a situation that KarinBot from earlier sort of puts you in. You're very much in a very intense situation fairly constantly. And getting a punish in some of that pressure can be really important for regaining your advantage and footing in a match. But also just being able to deal with that sort of situation and not feel too much pressure or tension can really change the way you look at the match. So training yourself in that sort of uncomfortable situation and figuring out how you can get out of it allows you to focus yourself on what openings you're looking for and giving yourself a bit of a goal to look at instead of basically feeling all of the opponent's hits, right? For those of you that play Marvel, you may be familiar with the sensation of constantly blocking while your opponent does a very long string, or not even blocking and they have you in a very long combo. It's very much the same feeling, and you may know from that experience that you can sort of autopilot a little bit. But autopiloting your defense is not the greatest thing to do, especially in Street Fighter V. you do have to block it as if it were coming towards your front. There's no back blocking that you need to do against that shuriken. I think that was Chip. Yep. Now, as you can see, Ibuki is able, like her bombs, to adjust the timing for when the shuriken returns, and it looks like a little bit the angle as well is connected to that. So, like the bomb, you can start looking for signs for which type of projectile, I guess we'll call it, makes up the V-triggers, basically. Which one she used, so you know what sorts of mix-ups you need to be prepared for, and how long you need to defend for, what timing windows you need to do the throw at, if you are able to punish her with a certain length of combo, all that stuff that you would also learn from V-Trigger 1 seems to be fairly relevant in V-Trigger 2 as well. So honestly, if I were you, I would probably use both. Anyway, I'm not seeing anything here that would need to change. Having matchup knowledge for both V-triggers is certainly useful. So I am going to move on here to our next bot. To a familiar friend of ours, our Mika. Now, this is probably one of the more V-trigger focused bots we will review tonight. She did not receive too many changes that are relevant to the bot itself. They did buff her mic a little bit. So the timing is a little bit shorter, so you may have to retrain some of your reactions against mic. This bot is mainly used to teach the players a lesson in bravery and general Mika matchup knowledge. since the CPU really doesn't teach you that many facets of her game plan. So this basically helps you fill in the gaps a little bit if you don't have a Mika player to assist you. But generally, the mic has been buffed enough that you want to be a little more careful at it in the further neutral. So I'm going to turn on the version select to have her take a seat here. Now, the interesting part about this V-trigger is that while there is, in fact, some variation in the timing you can call Nadeshiko, unlike the previous one, as you can see, she can't really change the direction much of where Nadeshiko comes from. It's always straight from behind Mika. Interesting, she didn't come out. I have not seen that happen before. And I play the character, so that's new to me. So, given that a lot of the design of MikaBot involved being able to change the direction Nadeshiko came from, and that sort of awareness and bravery that comes from facing something that is, for all intents and purposes, one of the harder things to tell in the game. What? I don't think I've seen EX type or EX wingless airplane on scissors before. Anyway. That's interesting. So why would a Mika player choose this V-trigger over the first, given that it's a bit more unpredictable? What would cause someone to go, yeah, I'm this type of Mika? Well, basically, yeah, that seems to basically cancel it out if you hit her That requires a bit of investigation later. But anyway, point being, this V-trigger allows you to handle scrambles as our Mika a little better. It gives you defense in scrambles. It gives you a way to cause a whole bunch of interesting, weird mix-ups that our Mika is not necessarily usually able to achieve. And overall, it still provides some of the defense that V-Trigger 1 allows. But as you can see, like right there, that's a type of situation that you would find a lot less often with Mika's first V-Trigger. So, in relation to the bot, it means that as you try to punish her in the recovery of, say, a mic or her heavy drop, her drop kick, you have less reliability in being able to punish her, and still need to decide how you want to react to that. You still have to essentially decide if you want to go for the points or take the risk and be brave and possibly take the hit. But in doing so, you learn a bit more about what is possible in that sort of intense scramble situation. It's honestly the type of interaction you could probably train on for months. So, as far as the bot goes, given it is a bot to train bravery, I can say that I don't necessarily think it's useless. However, as I was mentioning before, a lot of the inputs themselves were specifically thought out to more or less take into account for the fact that, well, we want lots of different types of V-triggers to happen, right? Because the directionality matters. Now, the moves she does have that cause her to have different Nadeshiko calls in V-Trigger 1. Ah, good. I think that means that punishing the somersault is also going to be more difficult against V-Trigger 2 specifically. V-Trigger 1 Nadeshiko is a single hit, for one thing. But also is just a bit slower overall compared to the chair. Once Nadeshiko gets on screen, I mean. So the situations that it can protect her from and cause you to feel stress about are a little different. But honestly, I don't think it requires that much change. The current moves that she can do, her V reversal, or not V reversal, V trigger from are her Lady Mika, a slide, which honestly she does not do that often, and in a specifically cheating command throw, honestly, the way it's designed. But honestly, yeah, no, I can't think of anything that would, like, not be needed in the bot as a whole. The moves that are used for it are fairly useful overall. Let's turn off her V trigger for a moment. I just want to see if there's any change in a less V trigger heavy flow. Yeah, overall, I'm not seeing basically anything that needs to change. The scramble situations that occur against this bot specifically already sort of benefit from the moves as they are. The directional ones, I mean, to call Nadeshko in feature the one. I think the last thing I need to check then is seeing if punishing her mic more often causes any change in her flow that would make this less useful. But honestly, I think you'll see a lot of both V-triggers online. Her first V-trigger allows you a stronger tool, since the unpredictability of Nadeshiko cannot be understated. And as you can see, if you are facing a lot of opponents, and this is common in Super Bronze, for example, that like to keep at the further side of the screen, the chair is a lot less useful for making sure that you can get back in on them. And given the nature of what a scramble situation is, it can be a little difficult on the Mika's side to make sure you capitalize fully on the V-trigger to get all of that nice damage you can get from it and all the nifty stun. I do not get enough Bison versus Mika practice. I do think that this bot could be improved a little, but not in specifics to her V-trigger. But I don't think that's necessarily something that would easily be able to be looked at on a stream where we have lots of bots to go over. So overall, I think I'd say that this bot checks out, but can probably take a second look later on. But overall, you can probably use both V-triggers to train your bravery for sure. And it seems to have enough mix-up in the scramble situation where you will learn a decent amount of the matchup against V-trigger 2. So with that, let's move on to our next bot. Alright. Now on to the beginner bouncer himself, Mr. BirdieBot. BirdieBot is now and forever the final exam to graduate from easy level bots. This is because of the design of the character and the particular skill that it requires. There you go. There were not many character changes to the moves of Birdie in particular that would change the way playing against BirdieBot goes. So our main focus here will be figuring out his new V-trigger and how it interacts with things. But first, get a taste of how he feels in his normal form if you are unfamiliar. The points for BirdieBot are to punish his dolphin dive, to avoid getting hit by cans. That's not a point, but Birdie gets a point if he hits you with it. Punishing hanging chain correctly. And I think that's the only ones that are relevant for my testing for right now. So this should be used by those of you who feel that you are comfortable with most parts of your gameplay already. It's definitely not the bot you want to be using right away for a new character unless they are fairly similar to one you already play. Ah, anti-airs. That was the fourth one. Anyway. But he is also fairly good at figuring out where you are weak in your gameplay. Since a lot of his stuff, while sort of slow, still requires fairly quick reactions. But he's good at training focus because of the number of different forces he has you concentrate on. The dolphin dive looks an awful lot like his jump, for example. At least at first, if you are primed to be looking at the air. His V skills also add a layer of complexity, since the can in particular can make certain jumps unsafe for you to do on landing. So I'm gonna switch to the second one here, now that you've gotten a decent idea of what he's like. Now, that specific part of his second V-trigger is part of why I find the V-trigger so interesting. I'm still not quite sure on the safety of that version of Hanging Chain. But it puts you in a range where Birdie, depending on the way he's played, can put you in a fairly stressful situation. Especially since in that V-trigger, he has multiple ways to mess with you. His command grab, as you just saw, is definitely in the bot. And that puts you at the range where you have to worry a little bit about the command grab. And also, Birdie has armored moves, in case you didn't have much familiarity with Birdie. So hitting a button right away on blocking the hanging chain that pulls you in into trigger 2 may not be the smartest of ideas. Which is not necessarily an interaction we get as often with V-Trigger 1, since the chains don't reposition you in the same way. Honestly, I got to play him a little bit since AE came out, and the more I play him, I feel like his V-Trigger 2 can do something slightly different from what his V-Trigger 1 does, in that while V-Trigger 1 is very good at testing your reaction timing and focus, V-Trigger 2 definitely still does the focus part, but it also sort of forces your decision-making speed and tests that due to the way that particular situation sort of pulls you in. You still have plenty of time to think about what to do, but not that much time, and the reactions afterwards, it does look a bit safe. I'm still not sure as to how safe or if that's true, but it definitely looks like a tight timing for sure. So if you're in that situation, you do need to decide pretty quickly, do I want to go for the response that would work good against him being armored? Do I want to chance the fact that he might do a critical art, since BirdieBot does have the capability to do that fairly easily, as you just showed. Or if you want to risk getting hit by an armored attack as you punish him for the move. But hey, you do get rewarded if you decide correctly as to what he's going to do next. And you get that point for the goal system. So it's a fun little mini game, and I definitely like the addition that V-Trigger 2 brings to this bot in particular. wonder why the Psycho Judgment didn't go off.
Perfect KO.
But regardless of what V-Trigger Birdie uses, he's definitely a good opponent for training. That's gonna hurt. For training a certain type of relaxation. And that if you try too hard against BirdieBot, you'll actually make your life a lot harder against him. In fact, he's a fairly good warm-up bot for that reason. He doesn't really require too much thinking, but he still requires focus. Which is why I'm interested in possibly finding a use for that decision reaction time. Thing that I was discussing earlier in regards to V-Trigger 2. Wait, that's not a projectile. In case you ever fight against me and I'm using V-Trigger 2, I absolutely adore the ability to do slide and get a free safety on it. It's my new favorite trick. But as far as changes to the bot, he certainly seems to use it at useful enough timings, and he doesn't overuse his meter. So you still have to think about the threat of him using that particular attack for a decent amount of time. It gives you another part of the mental stack that BirdieBot forces on you. As a charged character user, I've also found against BirdieBot in particular that you really can't hold down back as often, which sort of goes against every instinct. But that's mostly because, at least for me, when I'm holding down back, I'm doing a lot of thinking. And as I previously noted, that's not necessarily how you want to go about fighting Birdie. but more so the quickness and reaction timing required from him. If you're not holding down back and you want to go there, that's costing you precious frames. Similarly, if you want to use your stand medium punch to punish his dolphin dive for whatever reason and you are crouching, if you want to switch to that, that's also reaction time that you're wasting. So, until you got really good reactions, you may want to stick to wherever you are and just accept the counter hit you are able to get, rather than the one that you want to get. And that's a fairly good lesson to learn in Street Fighter as a whole. So while I do not think this V trigger is particularly bad to use, I do think he might require a little bit more extensive of testing if we want to modify him at all, but for now I think he's also, again, fairly good. You should be able to use either V-trigger without too much issue. It doesn't look like it ruins the bot, and in some ways it can enhance it a little bit. So with that, I think I will be moving on to F.A.N.G.Bot for another double dose of reaction execution.
Player of the 4 team.
Now, F.A.N.G.Bot is mainly about teaching the player to use their reactions to get in close to a character that has relatively strong keep-out game based on specials rather than footsies. It's not actually intended to teach you how to get in on an opponent trying to keep you out at all costs, but more so for tricky opponents who can lure you in and then damage you. Like some of the other bots, F.A.N.G.Bot can be modified and tweaked depending on character, and I think has some official variants. But, as usual, the one I am showing you is fairly close to the standard version. Now, unlike a lot of the characters in this game, in Season 3, F.A.N.G.Bot had received changes not just to his moves, but he also received changes to his first V-trigger. So, in a sense, he sort of got 2 new V-triggers. Although, it's not too different. The main change is that F.A.N.G.'s V-skill in V-trigger 1 is now a projectile and has a hitbox. So as you can see, I can parry it I can absorb it. I can throw it right back at him. Now, the points for F.A.N.G.Bot are basically... The main point is getting past his Ryobinda once he puts it down on the ground, and that's the point. Get past it in some way to get a hit on him. Because, as you can see, the ranges that F.A.N.G. ends up at after he does Ryobinda, save for when he backdashes, is really close to it, serving as sort of a shield on his lower body. And this allows him to use some of his less safe moves that are really low, like his sweep. In a fairly safe fashion. Also, an interesting fact for those of you who play F.A.N.G. or play against F.A.N.G. on a regular basis, the V trigger, if he has a V skill out already, will actually change mid-flight, so it can suddenly gain a hitbox, and if you are not blocking against it, it can still cause hit stun. I'm not actually sure what happens if it's, like, right next to you, but hasn't poisoned you yet. If it suddenly gains a hitbox, does it hit you right away? Does it expand? I don't know. But I do know that even though it has gained projectile status, if you block it, you still get poison. So it is still a decent threat in terms of you not wanting to waste your health away on poison. Which really, given the way bots are trained against, you really don't want to suffer from his poison very long, and that's why F.A.N.G. is one of the harder bots to fight. In all honesty, I still have a bit of trouble with him. When I'm more focused, I still end up getting quite a bit of HP loss just to his poison alone. His first V-trigger certainly helps with that, since you can't really undo the poison as easily. So let's take a look at his second V-trigger, since I think that notes most of the relevant stuff. Now, his second V-trigger produces an even more interesting weirdness to F.A.N.G.Bot as a whole. Basically, it gives his Ryobinda extra hits even outside of EX. So, if you are used to getting around his Ryobinda with projectiles, you're gonna have a much harder time against him. But overall, there aren't too many differences caused. F.A.N.G.'s original V-Trigger didn't actually do much. They certainly did him a great service by making it do anything at all in V-Trigger 1 beyond the Cloak of Poison effect. So honestly, both V-Triggers now have a little more depth to F.A.N.G. as a whole. I wonder if the V-Trigger also makes them stay out longer. I haven't done a test on that specifically yet. But overall, there aren't really that much changes given these V-Triggers. We generally recommend that if you use projectiles or are a more zonery person, to perhaps use V-Trigger 2 over V-Trigger 1 just because of the difficulty it can cause in dealing with his Ryobinda. And obviously, if you are more footsies oriented, having that extra layer of actually having to be afraid of his V-skill hitbox is probably up your alley as well. So overall, absolutely no changes are needed that I can think of. The bot still runs pretty well. There's not really that big of changes to his moves as a general thing. I think heavy Ryobinda is a little quicker or something like that. But yeah, the bot seems pretty fine to me, and honestly both V-Triggers upgraded the bot without us having to do any work. So that's great. So we are moving on to the last bot of the night.
Player of the 4 King. And fight.
So JuriBot is probably one of the least complex of the bots in terms of tuning up. Although F.A.N.G. was pretty easy, but there was quite a bit to explain. The purpose of JuriBot, if you are familiar, is to, or not, is to train those of you who already know your meaties but have a tendency to autopilot or stick too much to the offensive or defensive mindset and become predictable in your meaties. To think a little bit harder about your meaties and learn different rhythms to increase the unpredictability. Now, the bot will have a stronger wake up overall, since they buffed her EX pinwheel in terms of its invincibility. It now has much fuller invincibility than before, making it even better for punishing your meaties. So, unlike JuriBot, who is our sort of beginner meaty bot, she is now much more capable of punishing you and making you have to think about invincible moves on Wake Up. Before, it was somewhat inconsistent, though not overly so. But now it's definitely consistent, and you will most likely find yourself slightly frustrated if you So yeah, overall the buffs to Juri buffed her game plan a decent amount. They didn't really change the way things interact too much. But let's talk about her B trigger here for a sec, since one and two are a bit different. As you can see, her second B trigger drains your meter, and honestly, it's at a fairly high rate if she has you in a combo or offensive pressure string. Now, not all moves are able to suck away your meter, but it definitely adds a bit of meter awareness you'll have to learn. But her first V trigger mainly is a combo extender, making some things a little easier to link, or even possible for that matter. And it gives her free fireball kicks. And it improves her zoning a little bit as well with the light version of her fireball kick. But it does not really change that much about her gameplay one way or the other, since while she does charge her fireball kicks, not being able to charge them and just doing the fireball move was sort of already planned in the original design of the bot. And in V-Trigger 2, it's basically just as if she always has to charge them, which is really not that strange of a circumstance given what the bot is designed for. So feel free to use both versions. If you want to train your meter watching a little bit more on your side, not your opponent's, I would recommend using V-Trigger 2 just to get used to the speed at which she can suck away your meter. It's a lot quicker than you might think. Especially if you have meaties that specifically require EX meter. I know Bison has some setups where he gets good meaties off of his EX Inferno, for example, and he has setups with his fireballs as well on longer knockdowns that require EX meter to even start them. So overall, with her recent balance changes, JuriBot should be slightly more effective in helping you learn your meaties and help you with the mindset shifts she is intended to teach due to the fuller invincibility of her EX pinwheel. And also slight meter watching in that V-Trigger 2. But again, much like basically all of the bots tonight, we weren't really going into this expecting it, but I'm fairly sure almost all of them are fine to use both V-Triggers against. So, that is all for the evening. If you want to take a look at any of these bots you've seen on stream today, or some of the ones that you may not have seen, you can find all of them at 2-mk.org/bots. If you have any questions at all in regards to the new changes from the bots, give us a call on our contact page at 2-mk.org. Or if you find something that breaks the bot, please definitely let us know. This is JustVine with 2MK signing out.